Hey kids, who wants another rousing round of looking through all the gruesome ways your favourite comic characters have died horrible, horrible deaths? No one? Well, too bad, because we're doing it again. Oh god. Yes, it's time to sift through the most grotesque, the most horrific, the most try-hard edgelord ways that comic books have viciously murdered the characters within their pages. I'm Ewan, you're watching What Culture Comics, and here are 10 more of the most disgusting comic book deaths. Number 10. Ted Kord, Countdown to Infinite Crisis. Ted Kord, after spending the entirety of Countdown to Infinite Crisis chasing after a conspiracy that only he believes is real, eventually discovers that Maxwell Lord had gone mad and taken over Organization Checkmate in order to undermine the superpowered community. Now, Ted is a super genius and a veteran hero in his own right, but he's still a super squishy human at the end of the day, so when Max captures him, he knows that all it takes to put him out to pasture is a well-placed bullet to the noggin. With Ted getting just enough time to utter 4 of the most badass final words in comics history, Maxwell Lord shoots him in the head. What gets this death on this list is how the panel where he dies shows the realistic blood spatter from the bullet, as well as the panel afterward, hyper-focusing on Ted's bloody, mangled face on the floor. Number 9. Guy Gardner, Injustice Year 2. In Year 2 of DC's Injustice series, the Green Lantern Corps decide that they've had quite enough of Superman shenanigans and bring the entire Corps down on his head to take him down. They even strip Hal Jordan of his powers when he sides with Superman. However, in comes the sneaky old Sinestro to play to Hal's anger and ego by tricking him into thinking Guy Gardner, who was basically acting like the only adult in the room to give you an idea of just how bad things had gotten by then, had murdered his girlfriend. Armed with a new yellow power ring, he kills Guy by brutally ripping off his ring arm with his bare hands. He then lets Guy, stripped of his powers from the loss of said ring, fall to the earth below. Number 8. Daredevil. Daredevil End of Days. Daredevil End of Days, an entry into the Marvel The End series and a fine bookend to Brian Michael Bendis' run on Daredevil, was one of the best comics of its year, telling the story of how Matt Murdock met his end and how the people around him dealt with the fallout. But of course, Daredevil has to actually die in order to make that interesting stuff happen, and so in comes everyone's favourite psychotic kook, Bullseye, to finally put down the man without fear. After spending years in a self-imposed exile due to murdering the Kingpin in front of several witnesses, Daredevil comes out of hiding just long enough to have one last brutal showdown with his old nemesis. The two fight all throughout the streets of Hell's Kitchen, the pair evenly matched, but Bullseye eventually gaining the upper hand. The fight ends with one of the most brutal deaths in the history of this brutal character's world, as Bullseye takes Daredevil's own billy club and rams it straight through the soft part of his skull hard enough to come out the other end, with all of Hell's Kitchen merely standing there and just watching. It's really sad. Number 7. Spider-Man. Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe. One day, while Deadpool is doing his usual Deadpoolian routine, his 2 inner voices suddenly vanish and are replaced with a new one. This voice tells Wade a secret, one that is so horrifying to the Merc with the Mouth that he goes completely insane and proceeds to kill everyone in the entire Marvel Universe. There are many entries on this list that could have just come from this comic, but I managed to boil it down to just one shocking moment when Deadpool put a gruesome end to his bromance with Spidey once and for all. Spider-Man obviously takes some issues with what Deadpool is doing, and the two fight through the streets of New York. But just as it seems as though Spider-Man is about to make this a very short miniseries, Deadpool pulls a gun and blows half of Peter's face clean off, commenting that Pete's villains really should have thought of that as an attack strategy a long time ago. It's a shocking and abrupt death, not to mention gruesome, as you see blood and bits of teeth, eyeball, and other bits flying off of what remains of Spider-Man's face. Number 6. Rachel and Susie, The Walking Dead. When it comes to disgusting deaths in The Walking Dead, you really have your pick of the damn litter, as a lot of folks in this comic die, and they almost never die in a way that isn't gooey. Case in point, the twin daughters of Herschel Green, Rachel and Susie. You might know by now that the Walking Dead TV show changed a lot about several arcs in order to better fit with the storytelling medium of television. One of the most changed was the prison arc, not the least of which because of how many died in this story arc in the actual comic. Among the dead in the comic series are Herschel's twin daughters, who get viciously murdered and decapitated by antagonist Thomas. But of course, that's never the end of things in The Walking Dead, as dying is all it takes to become a zombie, so long as there's anything approaching a brain left behind. So, of course, Glenn has to then put the girls out of their misery once and for all by shooting their decapitated heads when they start groaning. Number 5. Ares. Siege. While nowhere near as impactful in the long term as some of the other big Marvel events from the 2000s, Siege still has its moments. And one of the standouts of the entire event was when Sentry ripped Ares in half. When Ares comes down to have some fun with the carnage around him, Marvel's Superman ripoff, Sentry, decides that he is not in the mood for Ares shenanigans, and so grabs him with both hands and rips him in two, from head to crotch. And of course, the moment is made complete with a nice full view of Ares' innards being everywhere, all the time, just ugh. Number 4. Iron Man, Marvel Zombies 2. I couldn't let a list like this pass me by without having at least one Marvel Zombies entry, seeing as how watching your favourite childhood heroes die horrible, screaming bloody deaths is really the only reason the series even exists. While the many sequels and spin-offs of this depraved universe gives one the pick of the litter to choose from, one of the grossest for my money is the death of Zombie Iron Man in Marvel Zombies 2. Marvel Zombies 2 takes place several decades after the events of the first comic, when the still zombified heroes, who have now become the new destroyers of worlds, suddenly begin to lose their hunger, giving them all a much-needed reality check of what the heck they've just done. A falling out ensues, a lot of folks die, but the part this entry focuses on is when the Hulk, sick to death of the other heroes, starts taking them out. For Iron Man in particular, Hulk slams his foot down on his chest, going through the armor and atomizing Tony's chest cavity. Having nowhere else to go and essentially being trapped in one giant iron sausage skin, Tony's guts shoot out of his mouth, nose and eyes, bubbling disgustingly out of his armor's eye and mouth holes. Number 3. The Punisher, Dark Reign. If you've never heard of Daken, the gist is that he's Wolverine's psychotic supervillain son who has Wolverine's powers but none of his morals. So yeah, bad dude to mess with, which is what the Punisher learned firsthand during the events of Dark Reign. When Frank Castle fails to assassinate the head of Hammer, Norman Osborn, Norman commissions Daken to deal with Frank once and for all. Daken chases Punisher to a rain-drenched rooftop where the two have a gloriously bloody and gory battle. However, skilled as he is, the Punisher is still a squishy human fighting a psychotic killer with adamantium claws, so he was only gonna last so long against him. Frank's death here is probably the goriest that this notoriously gory character has ever gone out, with Daken sadistically playing with his prey, slicing off bits and pieces to toy with him before finally dismembering him completely. He then tosses the bloody remains of the Punisher off the building and into a gutter below. The weirdest part of all, it's somehow less offensive than when Punisher came back as Frankencastle immediately afterwards. Now that was wild. Number 2. The Invisible Man, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. One of the darkest moments in Alan Moore's extensive bibliography is the brutal death of Griffin from the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Now, you would think the death of someone who's, invisible would be rather hard to make disgusting enough for this list, but Alan Moore finds a way. So, the setup with this is that Griffin has not only sold out the League to the invading Martian tripods, but when team leader Mina Harker goes snooping around, he beats her to within an inch of her life. And considering the terrible, terrible things he was getting up to when the League first recruited him, one could only imagine what else he would have done had Mina not gotten away. When Mr. Hyde finds out about this, he decides that Griffin's duplicitous, misogynistic shenanigans have been tolerated quite enough. He goes to where he's hiding and gives him everything Griffin gave Mina, and a whole lot worse, as he then proceeds to sexually assault Griffin for God knows how long. All we do know is that it took Griffin a long while to die, but die he did, as when Hyde sits down to eat, the blood on his shirt finally becomes visible. And number 1, the Ripper Murders, from Hell. There's no long holds on the guts and blood flying in an Alan Moore book, at least no more than is absolutely needed, and as a result, his work can often be twice as disturbing as you'd maybe expect. Nowhere is this better exemplified than in From Hell. Alan Moore and Aaron Campbell's interpretation of the failed hunt for Jack the Ripper is one of the best adaptations of those infamous events in Whitechapel, at least from a horror standpoint, due to how unflinchingly realistic it is with its depiction of the murders. We see, panel by panel, the killer methodically taking apart the woman he murders. It's truly disturbing as you see the fine surgical detail applied in murdering these poor women and then mutilating their corpses. Such a grounded depiction of such a horrifying string of murders leaves you squirming in your seat as you read, as the story forces you to watch every moment unfurl. Like, yeah, totally, go read from hell, it's amazing, but also be prepared for a lot of gruesomeness when you do. And those were 10 more of the most disgusting deaths in comic book history. Know of any others that we can add to the nightmare vault I keep underneath my desk that I can wheel out for a third video? Let us know in the comments below, and please also be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and to subscribe to What Culture Comics so you don't miss another upload going forward. As always, I've been Ewan, take care, and I will see you next time. Bye!